the Haunted Vermont podcast. My name is Paul Doski, and I'm on camera for once because, yeah, the other way was not working, so here's the new way of trying it. So I'm going to right now apologize about my background. Um, I've been organizing, trying to go through some stuff, so unfortunately, this is my background today, so I hope you enjoy it. Yeah. Anyway, without further ado, we have our lovely guest, Robert Brunelle Jr., or should I say Robert Waldo Brunelle Jr.
How do you do? Hello, everyone.
So, Robert, you know, we've had an interview with you before for the Haunted Vermont website back in 2021 or 2. Forgive me. I don't have it up at the moment. But anyway, I figured it was time that, maybe we could try to get you on for more of an audio session. And here we are. So I guess I want to start with, for those that may not have had a chance to read that written interview, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I'm a Vermont native. My family's lived here for 200 years. I'm a artist and a retired art teacher. I'm a book illustrator and a political cartoonist. Um, I'm a painter. You can see one of my paintings on the rack behind me. And I'm the vice president of the Northern Vermont Artist Association, and I'm a founding member of the Vermont Comic Creators Group. In 1997, I launched my political strip, Mr. Brunelle Explains It All, which appears monthly in the Funny Times and on Humor Times. And I participate in many art shows in Northern Vermont. I got stuff all over the place at the moment. This is our busy season. And I'm also a book illustrator. And for the last 12 years or so, I've been illustrating books with my friend Joseph Citro, who's Vermont's leading authority on everything weird and unusual. And we've done, done 6 books together so far, and we have one in the works right now. We've also done 2 posters, the Vermont Monster Map and the Vermont Haunted House Map.
Perfect, man. I have both your posters, and I don't have all your books that you've done together because I'm just picky like that at this point in time. But to be fair, it's more like I feel like I already have the Green Mountain Dark Tales, from back when that was originally published with the purple cover of Joe and stuff. So it's like, do I really need like separation of what you guys are doing for the Green Mountain Dark Tales, really? But anyway, that was just my take on it. But I know basically you and him are splitting it up into I believe I heard 13 volumes.
That was our long-range plan. Whether we'll get all 13 done remains to be seen, but I should point out that each new volume has additional material that's not in the original.
That is not in the original.
Yeah, he's expanding and adding stories. Essentially, his idea was to break the book up into themes. So one about ghosts, one about curious encounters, classic tales, and so forth. And we'll probably end up doing one on Bigfoot because that's common in Vermont. And who knows what else he's got up his sleeve. But he's always unearthing new material, so there's always more stories to be told.
Perfect. So, Robert, to kind of get into this a little bit, so you were a teacher, you teach art class still, at least as far as I'm aware, and stuff like that. But I think this is also one of the questions that somebody was asking to begin with. So I'm gonna basically say that Queen City Ghost Walk asked, so when did you first know that art was your thing?
Well, artists are born, not made. At least it was my case. I learned to draw before I learned to write. Fortunately, I had parents who made sure that my siblings and I always had plenty of drawing paper and plenty of pencils. I came from a working class family. My father was a plumber. We didn't have a lot of money, but My mother used to get giant end rolls from the newspaper and rip off sheets of it, and I would spend hours and hours and hours drawing, teaching myself how to draw. So I've done it my whole life. It wasn't until I was in the sixth grade, I guess, that I realized that I had a talent that other people didn't have. Prior to that, I just assumed everybody can do this. But it was around the sixth grade, when you're like 12 or 11, that I started getting people paying attention to it and saying, wow, that's really good. So that, of course, encouraged me. And I went to Catholic schools, which didn't have art programs, so I was more or less self-taught. So I didn't really learn to paint until I went to college, St. Michael's College. So I made my first painting in 1978, and I've been painting ever since. But I've always done it. Part of the issue is that I suffer from chronic migraine. So even as a child, I was one of those kids that couldn't run around in the hot sunshine, It'd make my head hurt. So I would stay in a dark room all summer drawing pictures. And my brother is also an artist, and my sister is a historian, but she also dabbles in art on the side. So it runs in the family. In my studio, I have paintings made by my great-grandmother back in the 1800s. So it's a family tradition, I guess.
Oh, wow. That is incredible. Now, real quick, since you touched on being a painter and you mentioned you're a cartoonist and stuff, one of the other questions that I got from Michael Heath is, do you enjoy cartooning or are you more of a painter?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's a 50-50. I probably started drawing cartoons before I became a painter. So I've been cartooning since I was a little kid. And they're two separate parts of the brain, I suppose. In my case, cartooning is more about writing than it is about drawing. My drawing, if you've seen my cartoons, the drawings are relatively minimal. As one reviewer said, it's talking heads. Sort of like Doonesbury was one of my inspirations. So for me, I think doing cartooning is more about writing than it is about making art. It takes me longer to write the captions than it does to make the drawings, because inevitably you have to edit because you have limited space. As I tell people when I do my cartooning classes, writing a cartoon is like writing haiku poetry. You have to squeeze a maximum of thought into a minimum of space. So inevitably I write too much, and then I whittle it down. And you've got to decide who's going to deliver the punchline. And you put them in the last panel. And you've got to set up the joke, and you've got to get them to land on the punchline. So it's a challenge. It's a lot of fun. I'm a political cartoonist, so most of my cartoons are about commentating on not just politics, but current events and current fads and the idiocy of modern life. So I wouldn't see myself doing things like a comic book, superheroes, that kind of thing. I would have flourished 50 years ago back in the heyday of the single panel gag cartoons, because in those days every magazine had a cartoon section. But unfortunately nowadays it's a hard sell. As far as paintings, that's my serious art. That's the stuff that goes in galleries and so on and so forth.
Well, technically, you did make a painting recently with your solar eclipse. So, did that go into a gallery? I know a lot of people were more asking for a print for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting fluke. I made that painting. Well, first of all, I made it. That's the actual view that my wife and I had from our front yard. And I made the painting, and I said, I'm going to put this in a particular show that was coming up. And she says, no, you can't. That's my painting. You cannot sell it. So I had to make another one exactly like it. So the original is now hanging in our house. The replica is the one that I turned into a print, only because somebody said, I love this. You do prints, because I can't afford the original painting. I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. Well, so far I've sold 30 prints. I've made more money selling the prints than I would ever make selling the actual painting. So the painting itself is now home, but it's going to go in a show I think I'm going to put it in the fair show that's coming up. But
What
I
is
do have the prints available. I have more prints available.
There you go. And normally people just contact you through your email.
Yep. All you have to do, I'm selling them for $35. Just email me at brunelles3 at AOL.com and I will send you directions on how to get one.
There you go. Perfect. Now, just I'll let this one slide in here because it kind of goes into the whole cartoonist and painting thing. Michael Heath again. This is more of a comment, but I swear I'm gonna butcher this word, so I apologize, Robert and Michael, but I'm hard hearing too, so some words aren't the greatest for me, and this is definitely one of them. So anyway, Michael Heath's comment is, you are good at whatever, but other cartoonists want to know your Hooper Square, oh God, uh, Hopper Square,
Hopper-esque?
Hopper Square,
Hopper-esque? Is that the
yeah,
word? Hopper-esque?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Hopper. People painted in true Vermont landscape set us in awe. And then, yeah, you kind of touched on. He said, yet deep down you like to cut in on politics for fun.
I think he's referring to my well-known affection for a fellow named Edward Hopper. Here. Edward Hopper, in my opinion, is one of the great artists, and he's my influence. The very first art review ever written of my show, they're the ones that coined the phrase Hopper-esque. So Hopper is my hero. And if you're familiar with Hopper's work and you compare it to my work, you'll see how much he's influenced me. Like him, I'm interested in urban landscapes. Even though I'm a old Vermonter, I don't do bucolic landscapes and covered bridges and barns and cows like the Flatlander artists do. Um, I grew up in Rutland, where you're at now, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so you know what Rutland's all about. It's sort of a post-industrial town with a lot of Victorian mansions. And I used to be the curator of the Rutland Historical Society Museum back in the 70s. I used to do walking tours of the old houses and stuff. So I love Victorian architecture. I love urban neighborhoods. I love that kind of landscape like Hopper did. So I think that's what he's referring to. And I also liked Hopper's color schemes. He liked saturated, rich tones in his paintings, which I do too. If you go to my website, mrbrunelle.com, you'll see examples of what I'm talking about.
Perfect. Yeah, I've been to your website and I've seen a lot of examples of your work, and I mean, I will say, like, you have a lot of unique, different. I'm just gonna say modes, I guess. I don't, or mood maybe might be better, but like, really depends on I guess what you're trying to portray or create or say, like with your politics stuff that you sometimes do. Sometimes you just do yourself in like the in the political sense, or maybe not even the political sense of, maybe I'll just say common sense of people nowadays. And
Well, my cartoon character, Mr. Brunelle, who is the cartoon version of me, gets to say and do things that I can't in real life, especially when I was a teacher. I remember being interviewed by Channel 3 News about 15 years ago. They came to my studio and we talked about that. I said, the cartoon me is freer than the real me. So I got the idea of making myself the hero of my strip from Robert Crumb, who's one of my heroes. He was the great underground cartoonist. And he's the star of a lot of his own strips. And so I did the same idea. It's like, the cartoon Mr. Brunelle is a middle-aged curmudgeon who looks tongue-in-cheek at the follies of the modern world and comments on them. I have a rather pessimistic worldview. I am a liberal, left-leaning, so that's my political point of view. But I try to skewer both sides equally, if possible.
oh, that's fair enough. I feel like, I mean, you kind of need a balance somewhere, right?
My mother used to always say, the truth is usually in the middle.
That is fair. That is fair. All right, Robert. Now, I know I asked you this in the written form, so I guess I'll ask you it again here. So, I mean, I know where Joe usually stands on this particular subject when it comes to like the paranormal and stuff. And as you said, you were brought up Catholic and stuff. So, um, I guess what I'm trying to say here is, so what is your own opinion on the whole like, paranormal, the unknown?
I'm a believer, unlike Joe, oddly enough. Even though Joe collects these stories, he's in reality very skeptical and he debunks them whenever possible. And he keeps an open mind, but I don't think he believes in the paranormal as deeply as I do. He sees himself more as a folklorist. His idea is to preserve the stories. That's what interests him because he's an author, he's a writer, and he wants to collect these stories and preserve them for posterity. Myself, on the other hand, I'm a firm believer in ghosts. I've had family members who have seen them. My wife grew up in a haunted house. She and her siblings saw ghosts. Um, and yes, I'm a Christian, so I do believe in the afterlife and all that spirit world. So I think ghosts have a scientific component to them. I think there might be a scientific explanation. My own personal theory is that they are energy patterns that are absorbed by surrounding materials. Because very often ghosts do the same thing over and over again every time they're seen, like a tape loop. And it's sort of like watching a movie. And I think people's brains are tuned in to the frequency. Very often you'll have a group of people who see a ghost at the same time, but one person will see it very distinctly, and the other people will see it kind of fuzzy or hazy, and the other person won't see it at all. And I think it's because their brain waves are all at different frequencies, like listening to a radio. Either you're tuned in to the frequency or you're not. And I think some people are tuned in and some people aren't. But yeah, I believe in all of it. Yep, Bigfoot, monsters. I think Nessie exists. I think Champ exists. The monster map that Joe and I created, they're all there. I think they're real.
There you go, man. Even Bat Boy, I think that's his name.
Could be. Who's to say? Weird things have happened.
That's right.
When I did the monster map, the picture of the human-faced calf, that came from an actual photograph. That thing really existed back in the 1920s. So, one of my favorite quotes was from a scientist whose name I've forgotten now. He said, "Not only is the universe stranger than you imagine, it's stranger than you can imagine."
Well, yeah. But, I mean, so have you ever seen that photograph that you just mentioned?
The photograph of the calf?
Yeah.
Yes, I found it online, actually.
It is online?
Yeah, it was from the 1920s.
So, I guess, because I haven't seen this photo, so now I'm trying to, like, ask you specifically. So, would you say that it looked pretty real versus it possibly being like a taxidermy?
Um, I don't think it was photo manipulated because this is back 100 years ago. They didn't have Photoshop. Was it deliberately faked? Possible. It's hard to say. It's an old black and white photo. You can't see the stitches or anything. It was stuffed. It was taxidermic already. It had died, and so the photo was of the stuffed specimen. So it's hard to say, and I don't think it exists anymore. So who knows?
Well, let's hope it doesn't.
Yeah. I had a great aunt that used to exhibit a two-headed cow at the Rutland Fair back in the 40s. So stranger things have happened.
Again, that's interesting. Well, that's like, what did I hear recent, like a couple months ago? Something about, oh man, what did they call it? Like a beaver trout?
Oh yes, I've seen pictures of that. Yeah, that's very definitely a hoax.
Oh
But
yeah, oh yeah.
yeah,
But it's a fun little hoax though.
yeah.
At least I assume.
Well, Joe's attitude is hoaxes are fun. You know, let's go with it. Let's keep it going. If somebody deliberately pulls a hoax, why not have some fun with it?
Exactly. Why not? Um, I mean, but who knows? Maybe sometime down the line we might actually genetically see one, and it's not even man. Well, I don't. Maybe I shouldn't say man-made, but I mean, you know what I mean. Like, it's not. It wasn't like we just took fake fur and stuffed it on a dead trout. I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, like P.T. Barnum's famous Fiji mermaid, where he sewed a monkey head onto a fish or something back in the 19th century, and he made a lot of money exhibiting that thing. So the public likes to be fooled, I think, sometimes. And the 19th century, newspapers had much lower scruples about honesty than they do today. And very often on slow news day, a newspaper would print a deliberate hoax just to sell papers.
Well, yeah. I mean, they needed to get their brand of newspaper out somehow, so they kind of needed to create something that would be um, out of this world, I guess, or something that you wouldn't really necessarily come across nowadays. So I mean, I get it. It's like you gotta pull something out of your behind just to kind of maybe fake it, which is probably 90% of the news that we get now. But I mean, I don't know. I maybe that's why I don't really watch TV that much anymore because I can't really tell what's true or fake anymore. Not to get political, but yeah, I mean, but yeah. So Robert, you've done a lot. I mean, so we talk a little bit about your illustrations a little bit. So when you and Joe started, which that was your first book, Vermont Ghost Experience,
Yep, this is the first one we did back. I think it was 2014.
2014, 2016. I can't remember anymore.
Yeah, I think it was back. I think it was 2014. Oh, let me look. It should say inside. This is the third edition, by the way. Let's see. Uh, oh, 2016. You're right. 2016.
Perfect.
I think we started working on it in 2014.
Oh, probably. Yeah, I know you guys known each other for a while before you guys actually met up too. So
Yes, we were aware of each other's work. I first heard of him when he did his radio commentary on Vermont Public Radio. He would read his little stories, and that's when I first heard of Joe Citro, and I was fascinated. And he was aware of my work because he'd seen it in galleries and so forth. But it was thanks to the miracle of Facebook that we finally connected. And then he came to a show that I was doing. There was a little mini Comic Con happening in Winooski, and he came to visit, and that's when we first met in person. And we hit it off right away because we have a lot in common. We're both old Vermonters, going way back. We have similar outlook on life and history and so forth. So it was his idea. He said, "How would you like to illustrate some books for me?" And I said, "Sure." He had worked with other artists. He'd worked with Steve Bissett. They did the Monster Guide together and so forth. But Steve is very busy doing other projects. So Joe said, "Let's give it a try." So we did the Ghost Experience, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And one thing led to another, and we've done all the others.
perfect, man. And here you are, like 5 books later or something like that. As you said, it's like I said, I kind of
Well,
lost
six
track.
books and two maps, and we're currently working on the third edition of the Vermont Ghost Guide. So we hope to have that out in a month or two.
So for people maybe wondering, Robert, I already heard from you when I met you at the con. But for those that may be wondering themselves, if they look on Amazon, because that seems to be the only place to find your guys' work nowadays is Amazon, because of the books retailers that are so fond against Amazon and stuff. But anyway, the point to this is they may have noticed that it said the second edition of the Vermont Ghost Guide looks like it's out of print. So I
Yes.
guess
that's why we're doing the third edition. What happened was the first edition he did years ago with Steve. The second edition he and I did a few years ago, and it was published by Erie Lights. But our contract ran out with Erie Lights, and so it's out of print. So that's why we're doing the third edition, which will have additional material. And that one we've decided to self-publish under our Bat Books imprint, and that way we don't have to worry about going out of print. One of the advantages of self-publishing is you never go out of print. It's always available, so we can just keep issuing them on demand. There are local bookstores that will carry our books. There's one particular chain that I won't mention that won't, but the small independent bookstores in the small towns will carry the books. And as you mentioned, they're available on Amazon, and you can contact us if you want one. And I sell them whenever I do a con somewhere.
That's right,
So,
you do.
yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of cons and stuff, so I have two for you that I want to bring up anyway, and I don't have it in front of me, but do have it pulled up on a tab. But anyway, one of the maybe I'll start with the older one. So you guys kind of did a different take, I'll say. So like example, you just put up the Vermont Ghost experience, and then you guys tried to do like your very own Vermont horror comic. Yep.
Yes, this was a lot of fun. His idea was, let's do a little mini graphic novel, so it's done totally in comic book format. And so he chose 3 or 4 of his favorite stories, and our idea was that we're ghost hunters, and let's go out and investigate these stories. So as usual, he wrote it, and I illustrated it. The cover is reference to the famous story of the frozen folk of Farmer Morse, where back in the 19th century, supposedly old people were frozen in the snow and then thawed out in the spring to save money. So
Yeah, and not just that, used to be somebody actually kept like a journal about this as well.
right,
And,
yeah,
well, he got invited or something to witness
right.
the process.
So we had a lot of fun. I had to come up with a cartoon version of ourselves, which I did, and a lot of it was done very tongue in cheek. I like old cars, so I had us driving this old car everywhere. And I created the crypto castle. We pretended that was our headquarters. It was this big
Nice.
house.
Was there some sort of inspiration though behind the crypto castle? Like,
No, he just said, make it fancy, and I love Victorian houses, so
hey, who
I
doesn't?
just went wild and said, this is the kind of house I'd love to live in. I was a ghost hunter.
That's fair. That's fair.
I live in a modest little ranch-style house, and one time I was interviewed by 7 Days, and they said, we thought for sure you'd be living in a Victorian house. I said, if only I could afford one.
Yeah, exactly.
When we did the haunted house map, Vermont has hundreds of haunted houses, but I told Joe, pick out the ones that are most interesting to draw. Don't give me the dull-looking houses. I want the really interesting-looking houses. So that's what we did.
Well, actually, now that you mention that, you might have to bring that poster back on for those that are visually seeing this on YouTube. But there is one location on this quote haunted house map of yours that technically isn't a house; it's actually a bridge. So it's actually still Emily's Bridge. I love the story that Joe told me, but I'd like to hear like your opinion on that one.
Joe is somewhat skeptical about the Emily Bridge story. He thinks that it was probably fabricated. He can't say for sure, but there are people who have claimed to have had paranormal experiences on the bridge. He himself went to the bridge and didn't experience anything. He suspects that somebody concocted the story, but somehow that story got legs, and it just sort of took off. It's probably Vermont's most famous haunted place. Anytime he does a lecture or if I go to a con, inevitably the first thing people bring up is, oh yeah, Emily's Bridge. So it's almost gotten to the point where he's sick of talking about it because anytime he does a lecture, inevitably somebody asks him about Emily's Bridge.
Well, then he's gonna hate me probably if we ever do a video interview together. But anyway, so what I love about this though is like, so I've been to the bridge back when I used to investigate with my old team, and we had an interesting night where we actually captured some weird images. We didn't get any EVPs unfortunately because the water from underneath the bridge kind of ruined the audio recording. So if we did capture any type of responses, the water was too much in the way, and I didn't have any special program to try to maybe remove the water. So if there was EVP there, I don't know. But either way, I got scratched. I've caught some other interesting stuff. We tried the whole like parking your car on the bridge, and it's supposed to like fog up, or you're supposed to get scratches or something on your car. We actually got a scratch on the car, but I mean, for all I don't know. I mean, my buddy said that it wasn't there, and but I mean, I really don't know. It's not like I really looked at his car thoroughly before the investigation as well.
Well, who knows? There could be something to it. I've never been there. I've never seen it myself, so I don't know.
And there you have it, Robert. I just know Stowe kind of takes the bridge into its own thing too, where they have it on the free maps that you can get. They actually show Emily Bridge on that map. There's postcards for it. There's like little small paintings that people have done.
Well, it's certainly become famous, whether there's anything to it or not. It's well known.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. So I mean, there's even now like I think I saw a puzzle, and I mean, I know I'm haunted Vermont and all, and unfortunately I don't have it with me right now, but I even have a toady bag that my buddy made for haunted Vermont for Emily Bridge because I just like the bridge a lot. So, and I thought it would be a neat design to have.
Cool.
Yeah. So all right. So real quick, Robert. So, I'll get this question out of the way too. But Dan Flanders was asking you, what's the scariest tale that you've ever illustrated?
Illustrated. Let me think about that. Let me quickly peruse these books. The scariest story I ever heard was the one my wife told me about the house that she grew up in. But the scariest illustration.
Well, while you're looking for for the illustration, if you have a minute, what's the story behind this old house that you're talking about?
My wife grew up in a house in Winooski that was haunted by what they called the man in the black hat. He would appear on the stairway, but you wouldn't be able to see his feet. He just sort of faded away. And they had instances where objects would appear and disappear, like something would vanish, like a piece of jewelry or something, and then it would reappear in thin air and just drop onto the floor. And they would hear music at night. The house itself was built in the early 19th century. It was very old. And so it got so bad that eventually they had to get an exorcist in, and that solved the problem. After that, the spirit went away. So let me see here. Boy. Probably the most interesting one that resonates with me, my favorite illustration, is this one. This is from the flood of 1927, where the floating house, it floats down the river, and there's people in it, and they said, well, I guess we're gone. And they go down the river and die. Flooding played a central role in Vermont's history. My father, who grew up in Rutland, lost everything in 1947 when Rutland was flooded. So I grew up hearing stories about flooding. The cotton mill ghost, that's Burlington,
Yep.
woman who was struck down by a train, and she haunts the area. She haunts the old cotton mill. The Dutton House is interesting. This is an example of my theory that ghosts are embedded in materials, because that house originally was in Chester, where Joe grew up. And then it was built in the 16th century, I believe, or 17th century. And they dismantled it and brought it to the Shelburne Museum. And when they did, the ghost came with it. So it was known to be haunted when it was in its original location. But when they rebuilt it in Shelburne, people have seen ghosts in it. So that supports my theory that ghosts are somehow embedded in materials.
Right. Well, ghosts are known to have their own, what's the good word, like essence into like an object. So maybe the ghost that went with that house, even though it moved down, if it's in the wood, or if they even took some sort of specific item that was in the original house before moving it, maybe that's what it's attached to. So, and I've always told people too, like if you get a rundown house and you're trying to do it like a fixer upper, the first thing that the energy of the house per se is it's gonna notice you repairing it. So people may not think that's energy, but it is. You're actually restoring the energy of a rundown house. So if anything, you're creating more energy, which in my own opinion, that's why we get uh, the energy activity goes up when you hear people say like, "Oh, I got this fixer upper," but now all of a sudden, like I feel like there's activity that wasn't there previously. But every time I do work on the house, it's almost like there's more, and it's like, well, yeah, you're feeding the activity. You're feeding the house. You're restoring it to its glory, and most of the time the presents that are there, they want to make sure that their old house or their house, depending on how you want to look at it, is treated well. So that's my theory.
Well, oftentimes ghosts are seen, like, for instance, going through a wall, and then research shows that where they go through the wall used to be a door. And so they're like on a film loop, going through the same activity, going up the same stairway, or appearing in the same window over and over and over again.
That's right.
You may remember back in the, I don't know how old you are, but back in the 70s, there was this fad called Curlin photography, where people would put their hands on special film and they would photograph it, and it would create, they'd see these aura or energy patterns around the hand. And it's a well-known fact, the human body and human brain operate on electricity. We're basically electromagnetic chemical energy factories. We generate energy. So we put out energy waves, and I suspect that sometimes those waves are absorbed, or the patterns are recorded in materials, and or even locations, ground. There are haunted trees. There's haunted patches of ground. It could be anything.
Oh yeah, like the indigenous people would believe that there's spirits in the tree. Like everything has a spirit. Yeah, yeah. And I thought you were gonna go with like the old-fashioned film of cameras, where what do they call it? Like ghost faces, ghost something,
Oh yeah.
uh, ghost photos. I forget what they call it, but they kind of like what you were just saying. Though you can move your arm, but then next thing you know, you could be going like this, and then they take the picture, but then it looks like there's a ghost over here, but it might have just been me.
Yeah.
But they think it's like their dead
Hmm.
relative. Um, so anyway, uh, we I wouldn't mind wrapping this up with your latest one there, your Green Mountain Ghostly Gallery one that you just did. with
Yep.
Joe.
This one. Yep.
Yep, correcto. So, um, what can you tell us about that? And is there kind of going back to like what Dan Flanders was asking? Is there a scary illustration in there that you love to do?
Hmm. That's interesting. Which one was my favorite? Probably the haunted train. The interesting thing about this book, Joe's idea was it'd be like an art gallery. So he said, let's do the illustrations in different styles. All my drawings are done digitally, by the way, and they're done with a digital pen and a digital tablet. So some of them, I make them with gray tones, like a painting, whereas other ones, the idea was to make them more like a scratch board effect. Let's see if I can find one here.
Scratch board, is that more like a
It's sort of reverse pen and ink, where you start with a black surface and then, like, that's a scratch board effect. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
start
yeah.
with a black surface and then you scratch out the highlights. So some of them are done that way, and then some of them were done in pen and ink style. So I can find one of those. Yeah. So like this one was done as if it was like a pen and ink drawing.
The unlikely visitations. Yep.
Yeah. So there's just because on the other books I did them all. Let's see. This book was all done in pen and ink style.
What book is this one?
This is the first one we did.
Oh, the
The
Vermont Creepy's Classic.
previous classes. And but the ghost, he really liked the cover on this. This was a lot of fun. I used Photoshop. I used Photoshop to make all these, and I was able to create this semi-translucent effect of the ghost using eraser tools and so forth. So that was a lot of fun to do.
It is always nice. So, like you were saying, you and Joe are taking this old book, basically adding new stuff, and hopefully trying to do like 13 volumes and everything. So, I know Joe's not here to say what like what he would say about it, but so I guess we'll try to do our best, or I'll try to do my best to ask you for your own take here. Is so when Joe and Joe asked you like, "Hey, I got the next idea. This is how I kind of want it." So how give us a little idea of like what went into this one.
Well, basically, the first step is he'll send me the story, and then I'll read it over, and I'll pick out images that I think would work dramatically and interestingly.
Hmm.
Every story has at least one or two dramatic points that would make a good drawing. So then I do a rough thumbnail, just a quick sketch, what I call a concept sketch, which I send back to him. I said, this is what I'm thinking should happen in this picture. But there's no it's just a very rough idea. And then he'll amend it. He'll say, well, let's tweak this or add that. Or he may say, no, I like it the way it is. And once he's signed off on it, then I go ahead and do the finished version. And then I send that to him, and then he looks it over and decides whether yay or nay. And either we adjust it or we take it. He takes it. And if he takes it, then it gets put in the book. Our goal was to have 2 or 3 drawings per chapter, plus the title page for each chapter, plus the cover and the front cover and the back cover. Now, something like the Ghost Guide, which was our most ambitious project, I had to make hundreds of drawings for this one because I had to make one for every single page. So there's a lot of drawings in this one. But same process. I would just suggest this is what I think will work, and
yay or nay, and
he will say, either we'll adjust it or we won't, and then we'll go from there. So we have, I usually acquiesce to his ideas because technically these are really his books. So if he says he wants it done a certain way, that's the way I do it. It's
Right.
always his decision is always final.
Right. Well, there's one in there that I don't believe it was your drawing. It was it might have been like an old photograph that like
Yeah,
from
he also adds photos to the books.
yeah like what did they call it? What did he call it? I mean it was either called like the Silk Road Bridge or the Red Bridge.
Okay.
That's in that one. That's the one in Bennington. I don't know uh, if you knew anything about that one or not. Um, Basically, it's like an old bridge from Bennington that got originally got torn down, but Joe kind of mentions it because there's really not much about it. And on the back of the postcard, it mentions something about like on a moonlit or on a moonlit night, you can hear like a headless guy going across the bridge and into like a farmland or something like that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, not all of it is, I guess, illustrations. I guess is what I'm going to say. Um, so I guess Robert is like so. You know, when you're doing these with Joe too, like, is there any particular one, even in this book, since we're talking about this Vermont Ghostly Gallery, like, was there one story in here where you kind of read it and went, oh man, like I really like this one, or like you
Um,
know, like maybe something like you knew about it beforehand, but maybe Joe touched on it more or something, and you know, it was
hmm.
like one that really stood out to you. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, let me see. The one that I really like in this book. Gosh, it's hard to say. It's like picking your favorite child here. Um, I'm partial to interesting buildings. This was a fun story. Othello gets lifted off the floor by a ghostly hand during a thunderstorm. That was a fun one to do.
Oh, that was the scratch out one that you
Yeah.
were talking about.
Um, Railroad disasters are uh, I like to read about because I had ancestors who worked on the Rutland Railroad. So there was a story in here about a rail train going off the rails. Um, hmm. So this one was fun. Like father and son hear a train, the ghost train. Trains are fun to do.
Is that the West Haven one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
As I said, once he sends me the text, I read it over, and generally an image will pop into my head. There'll be a certain paragraph that said, "Oh, yeah, this is the one that I need to illustrate."
oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, all right, Robert. Well, to end it, I guess is like for those that are wanting to become like a cartoonist or a painter, just real quick. I mean, you know, what type of advice would you give them, or like what type of technique would you say to try to see if they like it?
Well, my only advice is it's a job, and you got to do it every day. So my advice is to set up someplace in your home or somewhere, a studio where everything's laid out, so you don't have to drag out all your materials every time you want to be creative, and then just do it over and over and over and over again. Somebody once said that all art is really made up of two parts. It's made up of technique and poetry. Poetry is what you have to say as an artist, and the technique is how you say it. As an art teacher, I can only teach technique. I can't give you the poetry. Either you have it or you don't. To master the technique, you've got to practice, practice, practice. But if you're not motivated by the poetry, you're not going to bother. So you know within your own soul, do I have the drive to devote the hours and hours and hours and hours necessary to master technique? Do you have something to say? Picasso once said, every work of art is really a self-portrait.
That's a good one. I don't think I've heard that one. So that's a good one. I like that.
regardless of the actual subject matter, what you're really talking about is yourself. So,
I like that. That's a good one.
alrighty.
All right, Robert. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know we had some, some hassle on the original link, so we had to like figure out something real quick, which is why my background kind of sucks right now. But that's all right. Anyway, so Robert, you're like you mentioned before, and we'll just say it again. For those that are interested in your work, where can they reach out to you? But you know what? Before I we get there. Is there any upcoming projects, either from you or you and Joe, that you're working on? And you know what? How silly of me too. I never asked you about your book that you did, the lesser known haunted houses. So how stupid of me.
Oh well, that's actually a parody. That's all done humorously. It's my satire of every known horror trope, and that is available through Eerie Lights, and that's also available on Amazon. It's called The Lesser Known Haunted Houses. Um, uh, as I said, Joe and I are working on the third edition of the Ghost Guide, and after that, we'll probably resume work on the Green Mountain Dark Tales project. And people want to see my work, they go to my website, Mr. Mr. Brunelle.com, or just Google my name, Robert Brunelle, and you'll find links to everything. I'm all over. I'm all over the interwebs. So, and hopefully, I'll be doing the Nonfiction Comic Fest in November at the library in Burlington. That's my next gig. It's invitation only. I applied. I've done it every year. I'm hoping they invite me back. And if I do, I'll have my books and things for sale there.
Nice, nice. Now, are you still doing your drawing for 7 days, or did they completely kick you out?
They dropped me. They ran it for 4 years, and then they dropped it. But I am up for best cartoonist on the Seven Daisies. So we'll see. I'll find out at the end of August whether I get that or not.
Well, there you go. Well,
People are always saying, I wish they'd bring your strip back. And my response is write a letter to the editor and tell them that.
that's the best way to do it. Demand it. Yeah, demand it
But
back.
it does appear in Funny Times, which is a national humor magazine.
Nice.
And it's on the website Humor Times, which is another publication. And it also appears in a sometimes periodical called Exploitation Nation. You can see it there, or you can see it on Facebook because I post new ones every week.
Very nice. Yeah, it's always fun reading your little strips, especially. That's how I know what's going on in the world. To be honest, there, Robert, is all I got to do is look for your cartoon, and I'll be like, oh, so this is what's going on. This is what I missed.
So if this podcast appears like on YouTube or something, send me the link, and then I'll share it on Facebook so people can see it.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, just for what everybody else know too is thank you for watching, and check out MrBrunelle.com, and write to him, tell him Paul sent you, and that you want all his stuff because it's worth it. But
Sounds
no,
good.
really, Robert, again, thank you for your time so much.
Well,
Yeah,
okay, I'm glad we made it work.
we did. So hopefully we can figure out what happened last time. So now that I know this new trick too, it'll be a lot more easier too. So.
I prefer the Messenger video over Zoom. I find it the easiest, most user-friendly, and I've never had it fail on me.
That's right. The only thing I just needed to figure out is screen recording, which I did find out. So that was good. All right. So everybody else, keep your eyes open because you never know if an apparition